Welcome into another episode of Southland Shenanigans. I'm Josh Criswell, and I'm joined by my co-host, David Berry. We're back for episode 2. Had an introduction episode last week. Talked a little bit about Southland Conference favorites. We both had a couple of controversial remarks. Me with a bold FCS football prediction, David with his top Southland Eats choice. You want to check that out. That's on YouTube. Also have it pinned to my Twitter profile, so you can check it out there. But we're back for week 2, David, and we have a special guest in store for us this week. And with Southland Shenanigans, we'd figure, let's keep the tradition going with the name. I think the thing that we're going to be talking about today is the epitome of Southland Shenanigans, the battle for the paddle.
Yeah, definitely. First, great to be back. We made it to a second episode. That's always good. The pilot was pretty good. Like you said, we're going to be talking about the battle for the paddle, and there's no better person, I think, to talk about it. He wrote stories on it. He's covered the game. Then none other than Mike Gegenheimer. He's the former Nicholls beat reporter for the Houma Courier. Mike, talk to us. How you feeling? How first, quickly, how have you been dealing with the quarantine, being at home?
Just trying to stay inside as much as everyone else, and stay busy with different projects around the house. Just a lot of watching TV and Netflix and all that. Just I'm wearing it just like everyone else.
Right. Well, we whenever we got this thing going, we kind of started out of the notion of a wacky fall in the Southland that bled into a wacky basketball season. And whenever we talk about wacky stories around this league, this is one that kind of stands out to me. And just because of the unique nature behind it, has a really cool backstory, obviously. But there's also a lot of funny. Like whenever I read your story on it, it was funny. I was at the McNeese game, grabbing some lunch with all of the Sam Houston State SIDs, and one of them pulled up your article actually and started reading it, which went into the history of this Nicholls versus Texas State rivalry. So Mike, explain to the fans for us, what is it that makes the battle for the paddle such a unique Southland shenanigan?
Yeah, so for those who aren't really familiar with the way this started, was that I believe it was, let me see, I want to make sure I get this correct. In 1998, there was already a bit of a rivalry going between these two schools. They would go back and forth and everything. But then there was this massive flooding in San Marcos, Texas, and they had to actually move the game. And it was an extremely devastating flood. I believe it was 25 people died. These record floods, it was devastating. But, someone kind of, I guess, made a little joke about if Nicholls did try to come to that game, instead of postponing it, they would have had to paddle their way there on a boat. And, football being what it is, the Southland being what it is, it kind of just became this joke. He turned a tragedy into history and to something that these teams can be proud of. And so they started playing this game where they actually got a physical paddle. And, just like any good college football rivalry, whenever you win, you get the paddle, and you lose, you got to give it up to your opponent. And so they went back and forth for a few years until 2010, Nicholls won it. And then in between that 2010-2011 year, Texas State announced that they were going to move up to the FBS level. So they would no longer be in the Southland. But there was this gap year, I guess, where they hadn't officially moved up, but they were still playing the remainder of their games in the FCS. They were still playing Southland teams, including that game against Nicholls. So the controversy came in when Nicholls determined that the rivalry was over after 2010. Former coach Charlie Stubbs and former athletic director Rob Bernardi, they decided that Texas State now had an advantage in scholarships, advantage in money, and they were going up to FCS or FBS. the rivalry was over. They weren't going to play any more games. They had no more games scheduled. So that was it. 2010 was it. 2011 was like any other FBS, FCS game. And well, Texas State disagreed. Basically, to sum that up as shortly as I can, they thought that if you're a rival no matter what division or conference you're in, no matter how often or how few times you play, you are a rival. And so they wanted it, that 2011 game to count. But like I said, Nicholls had won it in 2010. They had the paddle, and Coach Charlie Stubbs decided, well, we're not even going to bring it. And of course, Texas State won. Nicholls didn't bring it. They didn't turn it over, and they never played again. So it just sat in Thibodaux for years and years and years. Now, the mystery of the battle for the paddle, which is what that story I wrote was about, is that somewhere between 2011 and last year, 2019, the paddle went missing, and no one had any idea where it went. I spoke to Rob Bernardi, the former athletic director. He claims that when he left the school in 2016, I believe it was 2016, 17, somewhere around there, that the paddle was still at Nicholls, which would suggest that Charlie Stubbs also didn't have it. There were some theories that maybe he took it when he left the school during the 2014 season, but also the Nicholls administration, the current administration, I guess former one after when Matt Roan was still there, he claims that it was not there when he was there. Rebo declined to comment. So there was some rumors that a fraternity maybe stole it. There was a rumor that a local restaurant, which I think we were going to talk about food, which you should go eat at Bubba's Po' Boys, but they have a bunch of sports memorabilia on their walls. There was rumors that they had it. I went and talked to the owners of Bubba's. They said they had no idea what I was talking about. They had an older paddle at one point that had broke, but then they got a new paddle. This was during the heyday of the rivalry, so that wasn't the paddle that they had. And basically no one knows where this came from, or where it went rather. And then in 2019, they played again for the first time since they had stopped playing, and it was that FBS FCS game. It was a guaranteed paycheck game. Nicholls did receive money for that. But everyone was very excited to renew this rivalry. Nicholls was all for it. Texas State, of course, just wanted that paddle back. So they actually made a new paddle for themselves that they awarded to themselves after their win. And now there is no, as far as I'm aware, there is, yes, you can see kind of the paddle there a little bit, but there is no, to my knowledge, there is no more games scheduled on the books. They do not know when they're going to play this game again. But Nicholls was all for playing it again. Texas State, I know some of the fans were a little upset that the Matt Roan's comments about, we'll definitely play as long as they pay us just like any other FBS team. I thought that was reasonable. You're not going to play an FBS team and not get paid. No one's going to do that. North Dakota State isn't going to do that. But some Texas State fans disagreed and think it should be a rivalry and they shouldn't have to pay. But that's, I guess, a different argument. And so that's kind of where we are. We don't know where the paddle is, but there's a new paddle, and we'll just have to see where that rivalry kind of plays out.
That is the epitome of Southland Shenanigans, honestly. Yeah. That's amazing. I guess, do you have, I know you said that you don't officially know, do you have any ideas? Like, while you were writing the story, did you think of any possible, like, educated guesses as to where it could be, the paddle?
We're not talking journalism principles here. We're talking about what is your speculation on where the paddle is?
I would think the two most likely would be a fraternity stole it. I mean, that happens all the time. And if you ever go into the Nicholls football facility, the trophy case is just like out there, and it's not exactly a high security installation. You're not stealing the national championship trophy from LSU here. So it would be very, especially in those days, it would be pretty easy to get into it. They may have added some locks since then, I'm not sure, but so my guess is either that or I know some people thought Charlie Stubbs may have taken it, but I mean, what was explained to me is he was kind of out the door pretty quick, so I don't know if he did. I think there was also some thoughts that maybe a janitor just threw it. They like redid the trophy case, and the janitor just like threw it away or something. Like it could really be anything. I mean, a small program like that, it could just be in a closet somewhere. I mean, it could just be in the back of some maintenance closet in Thibodeau, and it's just behind some boxes and no one knows. Like it could be. It's probably something like that. So.
Man, that's hilarious, and like I said, just so shenanigans, so much.
and I guess
I was just gonna say, in Texas State fans were. I mean, this was a legitimate rivalry. I mean, it's I kind of compare it almost to on a big, obviously not the same scale, but a Texas A&M, where I mean these were two teams that did not like each other. They had history, and then one team left and they just stopped playing, but there's still that kind of bitterness there. And you saw that in 2019. Texas State cared that they won that game. I mean, how many FBS teams actually care that they beat an FCS team? And but Texas State definitely did. And I mean, that you had some fans that wanted that paddle back. That they still remembered what went down, and they thought that this was rectifying it. So I mean, there is some bitterness there.
How do you think the average Nicholls fan views the battle for the paddle today, you know, where we are in 2020?
It depends. It's kind of, again, so to compare it to like a bigger school in LSU Tulane, like most of your older LSU fans really care about LSU and Tulane, because they remember those games. Same thing with like LSU and Ole Miss. That still holds a lot of power because those teams were good a long time ago, and that rivalry was really bitter back then. Younger fans care about it probably a lot less. You know, the students of Nicholls don't really remember those bitter games or anything like that. Yeah, they've heard the stories, but it is what it is. They're more focused on beating Southeastern, McNeese, Sam Houston, stuff like that. They're less worried about Texas State. But you know, a trophy's a trophy, and everybody wants to win it, and so it still does have a little bit of something to it. But it's definitely, I think, more for older fans who remember those games.
Right, and older fans and newer fans alike are something that are going to be able to appreciate our next topic. And, you know, it's something that I guess started a little bit of a Southland shenanigan of its own. Really, David, I think, kind of got that one flowing last year. So why don't you take us away on this next one?
This, oh boy, when we're talking about the Nicholls,
the North Dakota.
Oh yeah,
the tents, David.
Listen.
The tents.
So I'll say to give the pretext, going into the game, I had heard about this. You know, Nicholls hasn't been great with the away accommodations for teams, and this is not recent. No matter what people said, despite it becoming national news last year, this is not something that just started last year. I've seen pictures of this for years. But, you know, after the game, I'm interviewing some McNeese players and coaches, and I see the tent and I see players walking, you know, from the tent to these portable showers. And it was cool outside. And, you know, I went on Twitter and, you know, I kind of just made my opinion known, as I am known to do. And that, you know, it kind of started a firestorm, if you will, because a few weeks later, Nicholls ends up winning the conference. They're going to host a playoff game. They host a team in North Dakota that is, you know, going to, you know, have some fans coming to the game. And it this, I guess you can take it from here, Mike, and tell me what I started, the consequences of what happened, because I know a lot of the story went national for FCS Twitter, and those North Dakota fans let you hear about it, right?
Man, it wasn't just North Dakota. I think some of Josh's people over at Sam Houston, everyone's yelling. They're yelling at me about tents, man. Like, I don't care about tents. Come on. Like, I'm trying to prepare for a playoff game, one of the biggest games of the year. I'm trying to figure out how I'm doing all of this stuff, and I got every radio station in North Dakota yelling at me about tents, man. Come on. Like, and people are blaming me like I set up the tent. Like, it was my tent. Like, I don't know anything about tents, man. Like, go ahead.
No, what I was gonna say is I understand, and I definitely understand that, and I wouldn't expect the home beat writer or anybody related to Nicholls to make a big deal about the home or about the away accommodations, because they don't see the away accommodations. Like, you, as the former Nicholls beat reporter, you're going into the home facilities, so you're going to interview in all of that, in the home stuff, which is obviously much better.
And even for us in the Southland too, it's something where the first time, like, it's something that you notice for sure, but it's not like any of us felt prompted to like write an article about it. Or I think the thing that I saw that was a little bit over the top was the newspaper up in Grand Forks. I think their editorial board actually wrote an editorial about how the NCAA looks foolish, and I'm like, it's a little excessive.
I think it was a state representative from North Dakota yelling at me on Twitter about it. Like, they were like making a political thing about it. I know Nicholls. First off, I know Nicholls isn't the only school that does this. I think Incarnate Word has something. Is it Incarnate Word or Lamar? One of the two has. They didn't even like have a tent. It was like
I think Northwestern State is something along those lines. I know they had a similar kind of situation.
I covered Southern for a while. I think they had a similar setup for like a year or two in between some stuff. I think one of the important things is, and I know it was a big deal with the hosting the playoff game, Nicholls met all of the requirements to host a playoff game. So all of these complaints should be directed at the NCAA. If you're mad that Nicholls got a host with this setup, well, they met all the requirements. They did everything they needed to do in order to host a game. I am also of the thinking that if you are not going to win a game because you're inside an air-conditioned tent as opposed to a room, then maybe you weren't destined to win that game to begin with. I just don't think I get it. It's uncomfortable and it sucks, but I just don't think it was, I don't think North Dakota State wins that game if
North Dakota State. North Dakota State's winning. You said North Dakota State.
Oh, did I say North Dakota? Yeah, North Dakota State would have won that game. Yeah,
You're gonna have Bison fans all over your ass here in a second.
I probably will. I will say this: if you ever have a chance to go to Fargo, North Dakota, to see a game up there, that was a fun town, man. North Dakota State was a great place to see a football game. Fargo was so much fun, man. I had a great time up there. So if you ever get a chance to go up there, go to North Dakota State in the Fargo Dome. And visit up there, man.
I completely forgot that you went up there. Tell us about what that experience is like. 'Cause I mean, that is really, whenever you think about it, that is the cathedral of, me and you are both LSU guys. Tiger Stadium is the cathedral of college football, but whenever it comes to the FCS, the Fargo Dome is exactly that.
It was, first off, the people in Fargo were some of the friendliest people I've ever met. Like, everyone was super nice. I went to, like, I guess their version of, like, Walk-Ons, which is kind of like their local bar restaurant kind of place that's associated with the school. It's not officially associated with the school, but, like, the unofficial kind of meeting place. This place called Herd and Horns. I went there a couple of nights. Great food, super friendly people. Everyone was, oh, thanks for coming up and, telling me all this stuff. And Everyone was super, super friendly. Loved the people up there. It was freezing cold, and they all made fun of me because I was cold, and I wasn't. I was like wearing 6 jackets. They all laughed at me because apparently it's only cold up there when you hit like the negatives. But anyway, but yeah, the game was a great experience. Tailgating is obviously a huge thing, and it's very different than LSU because LSU, it's all, open tents and everything like that, and everyone's all spread out, whereas this is actual closed off tents, and they got heaters in there, and it's like 30 people all crammed in these little tents. But it's a really great time, and like I said, it is probably one of the best experiences in FCS football, and absolutely worth going to check out for really any football fan. There's a reason ESPN has gone there multiple times to have game day, because it is a legitimate major college football destination.
Yeah, I think that's one that anyone that covers the FCS, that they talk about the Fargo Dome. Whether you've been there or haven't been there, I think you either have been there and have an amazing experience, or you're still waiting to cross that off your bucket list. But sorry, go ahead, David.
No, I just want to say I agree, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to go, but I hope to be able to. But Mike, I do want to make sure, because if fans watch this video, there might be some Northwestern State and Lamar fans that will probably let you know. I rarely defend other fan bases, but I will say Northwestern State, they don't have, it's not outdoor. They have like a little tiny like locker room, and Lamar actually has a really nice one. I will say that. Yeah, so I just want to, I'm actually doing that. I'm going to save you this time, because the next time, because I know there's at least one Northwestern State fan that I know watches this. So they will come and they will say something to you.
Well, in my defense, I think it was Josh that said Northwestern State.
That was on me. Yeah, that was completely on me.
Whoever it is, they're definitely going to respond to you.
Yeah, blame that on Josh. I think I was the one who said Lamar, but I think I was thinking, is it Incarnate Word that?
It probably is.
We're fine, man.
But no, I'm already in Northwestern State's good graces, because last week me and David made our top Southland Eats picks, and I did Natchitoches as a sneaky pick. As a just the whole overall experience. David turned a little bit of heads with his choice of Beaumont, Texas. Mike, you spent some time down there in Thibodaux. Tell us where we got to go if we're heading down south, down the bayou.
We're talking food?
Yeah, we're talking food, drinks. Where are we hanging out if we're down, in the Thibodaux, Houma area for a night or two?
So one thing a lot of people don't realize about Nicholls is they have a world-class culinary institute there. That is one of their main things, is their culinary school. And so they produce a lot of really good cooks and chefs and things like that. So there actually is a pretty good food culture down there, on top of, that traditional kind of Cajun flavor that is, a lot of the stuff that Louisiana is famous for, that Thibodaux, Houma area really does just as well as anyone. For the best places to go in Thibodaux, and I'll kind of leave Houma out of this for now, but the best places in Thibodaux, we talked about it before with the Battle for the Paddle, is Bubba's Po' Boys. I believe it's actually Bubba's 2, even though there's 2 Bubba's Po' Boys, but both of them are Bubba's 2, which is a very Thibodaux thing when you kind of think about it. It's a po' boy place. It's going to be your classic po' boys. I always get the overstuffed roast beef. I think it's as good of a roast beef po' boy as you're going to find down here. Absolutely fantastic. They do a lot of seafood, fish fries and things like that. Great food. I believe at one point they were voted like one of the best sports bars in the country, or at least in Louisiana. I can't remember. But definitely check out Bubba's if you can. The Bourgeois Meat Market, which is kind of like a butcher shop, but they specialize in beef jerky, boudin sausage, and things of that nature, is absolutely fantastic. It's a family-owned business for like 120 years, something like that. It's actually a really interesting story. A couple months ago, before I left Thibodaux, I was driving up to Houma, and a car had slammed into the front of Bourgeois Meat Market, smashed up everything. A couple people were hit. Luckily, no one was really seriously injured. But the car was fully into the shop, and they were open the next day, selling everything. And within a couple of days, they were basically back to full strength. So, I mean, this is a very dedicated family-run business. I believe they were on one of the Food Network channels or something for their boudin. Definitely go check them out. Their beef jerky is amazing. And then also, I know, Josh, you got the barbecue kind of out your way, but if you're looking for some barbecue in Thibodaux, Big Mike's is absolutely fantastic. Some of the best barbecue I've had in Louisiana, just fantastic food. So I would really say those three are the best. The downtown area is pretty neat. There's some nice bars. There's not a whole lot, but they do have some, and it's kind of that old town feel, a little bit like a Northwestern state. I really enjoyed it down there. So definitely kind of check out those areas if you're ever in Thibodaux.
I will say, I believe I went to Big Mike's, right? Because I think I tagged you.
And you said you didn't like it.
It was okay. It wasn't like my favorite, but it was good. But I know you said you. I remember. I tagged you because you had I think it might have been a playoff story from 2018. Was like right there when I was ordering. I was like, oh, here's Mike's byline, right? And like they had it framed. So, but no, it was okay. And then speaking of the downtown, I remember I went when I got into Thibodaux the night before the game. I did go downtown. I didn't stay out very long, but I went to this pizza place. It was like one of the only places. Yeah, it was the only place open for food, and I was really hungry, and I didn't want Raising Cane, so I went there. It was pretty good, but yeah. Now that speaking of that article talked about those 2018 playoffs. Now, after you guys or Nicholls goes to the playoffs, another successful season, a lot is gone, especially in the form of quarterback Chase Forcade. They have hopefully what they think is the quarterback for this coming season. Mm-hmm. What do you know? Obviously, you're not there now, but I'm sure you know plenty about the roster, who left, who's still there. Can you tell me about what you expect from Nicholls football going into this season?
Yeah, so the quarterback you're talking about here is a guy by the name of Lindsey Scott, who, if you're a fan of Louisiana football, particularly high school, even a little bit of LSU, you probably recognize that name. Lindsey, first of all, is the son of Lindsey Scott Sr., who was on some of those Pete Richardson Southern football teams that won national HBCU national championships that some people may remember. But he was one of the most successful quarterbacks in high school, Louisiana high school football. Playing as Zachary, led them to a state championship. And I was actually there. I covered him a lot that year, and the kid was he was the type of guy who puts the team on his back and just would not lose. He just was this dynamic kind of playmaker and just an absolutely natural-born leader, a phenomenal kid. I believe he had a scholarship offer, or I guess not technically a scholarship, but he could have gone to Harvard out of high school. Instead, he chose to go to LSU, but there was a lot of guys kind of ahead of him, and he never really made a whole lot of waves there. So he ended up going to JUCO out in Mississippi, won a national championship there, was one of the highest rated quarterbacks coming out of JUCO that year. Then goes to Missouri, where he was going to compete for the job. And Kelly Bryant ended up transferring from Clemson to Missouri. So he ended up sitting behind him, never really had a shot. And so he transfers into Nicholls at the beginning of last year, I think like 2 or 3 days before the first game. He went there. He did not play last year. I don't know how much he would have played if he was eligible with Forcade and everything, but he's been kind of with the team and practicing and working and stuff like that. talking to him during the spring for the 1 or 2 days that they were able to have it, I thought he looked like he might have slimmed down a little bit. Rebo says he's at the same weight, but he still looks very good. The interesting thing about that position is I think he might actually be a better technical quarterback than Chase Forcade. This kid was a stud, man. I think if he goes to a different school other than LSU from the start, maybe like a mid-major kind of school, then he has a chance to really be something. And
I mean, he was the Louisiana Gatorade Player of the Year his senior year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
And he deserved it. He was a phenomenal player. This was a really, really good guy, and very smart, a great leader. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see. He's not going to have that connection that Forcade has. He's not going to have, that undying kind of loyalty that the team has. But if he can establish any part of that with the weapons of Dejon Dixon, who I think has to be a top 3 receiver in the country. That guy is an absolute freak. And Julian Gums, the running back, who I think is one of the best in the Southland, if not one of the better ones in the country. He has some weapons. A lot of the offensive line is coming back. And I think there is a potential where Nicholls' offense could be even better than they were last year. Because if you remember last year, especially Josh, you remember that Sam Houston game, they were so beat up. They had, in that middle part of the season, just no one helping them because everyone seemed hurt. Even Forcade went down for a couple series. And, I mean, if they can stay healthy, I think that offense could be really, really something special. And I think a lot of the bigger question marks are going to be on defense, losing Sully Lesh and some of their linebackers. But they also picked up some guys in the signing class and some JUCO guys and some transfer guys that I think could easily be some studs as well. So Nicholls, if they can answer those questions, I think could easily compete for another title, if not win it. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of those new players kind of fit into their system and if they actually can live up to their ability.
Just one last question. Sorry, what you got, David?
No, I was just going to say two of the best playmakers that I saw last season were for Nicholls, and it was Dejon Dixon and it was Sully Lesh. Dixon, obviously Mike was at the game with me. In that first half against McNeese, he absolutely ripped their secondary to pieces. I think they were trying to go single man, man coverage, no safety help. And he just absolutely destroyed them. Eventually in the second half, they adjusted and put a safety over, but he absolutely destroyed them. And Sully Lesh was just wrecking McNeese's offensive line. So I think that's going to be a big question. Can they replace him? Because he was such a force along their defensive line. But no, sorry, go ahead. That's it.
Yeah, the thing about Dejon is, listen, we could complete passes to Dejon Dixon. That kid is just bigger and stronger than everyone else. You throw a ball up, he's going to go get it. He is just an absolute animal. I'm not lying when I say I think he could be the best receiver in FCS football this year. And Sully, his thing was, and you actually saw this after the first couple games where he didn't play from a back injury to when he did come into the season, he changes the defense. He takes up so much focus, or he took up so much focus from the offensive line that he actually changed what they would do. And he was such an impact player, even when he wasn't making plays, which for him was kind of rare. He was always making plays. So that's going to be the difference. Is they're going to have guys who have the physical tools, but are they going to really take up that space in the offense's mind the way Sully did? And it's going to be interesting to see how they fill that. They definitely have some very, very talented young guys to come in there that could do it. It's just going to be who's going to be the one to step up there.
One last one for you, Mike. Nicholls, back-to-back playoff appearances, but also back-to-back exits in the second round. You talk about Dejon Dixon out there and just the amazing talent that he has at wide receiver. You've seen a lot of Lindsey Scott. We've talked about him a lot today. Do you think having that kind of technically gifted quarterback behind there, like we talked about, was arguably, won an award for being the best player in what's, I believe, per capita, the state that produces the most NFL talent in the country. Is he the guy you think Nicholls needs behind center to get over that second round hump?
Man, it's so hard to answer that because, listen, there will never be another person on Nicholls campus like Chase Forkade. That guy, the things he was able to do and what he took that program to was just special. There will never be anyone like Chase Forkade. So it almost feels weird to say, like, oh, Lindsey Scott may be better, but because no one will ever be better than Chase. But he is.
But as far as when you get to that level of the playoffs, because it's like one of those things where Chase was so good. Like Chase is. We look at the history books and we will forever look at Chase Forkade as one of the greatest, not just quarterbacks, one of the most special athletes to ever put on a uniform, in the Southland Conference. But you also, you look at, those rounds when you get to Eastern Washington, you get to North Dakota State, it almost feels like, in a sense, a playmaker like Lindsey Scott and a guy like Dejon Dixon with another year on him kind of seems like a perfect storm brewing.
Yeah, that offense I think really could be something special this year. And again, don't forget Julian Gums, who just was an absolute monster last year when he was supposed to be the third string back, and he ended up being one of the best in the conference. So they definitely have the tools there. They definitely can do it. It's just going to be, can they do it? So the thing about your question about the playoffs, I don't know what it's going to take to get over that hump. They're definitely heading in that right direction. They're taking steps. That Eastern Washington game, I still think they could have won if they don't have that kick blocked right before halftime and give up that touchdown in the last play. That really changed the game. And then this year you play North Dakota State. What can you do? It's North Dakota State, but so it's just kind of, when are you gonna get over that hump? When are you gonna get that break? But they are building this program for the long haul. I don't think Nicholls is just gonna collapse. We lost Sully, we lost Chase, we lost this and that. We've lost all these people. We lost the most successful senior class ever. We're just going to collapse. I don't think that's going to happen. You're still going to see them competing. It's just going to be, are they going to be able to keep up that momentum and continue to keep competing at the level that people are kind of used to over the last 3 years?
I think the biggest, honestly, I think the biggest problem for Nicholls probably won't even, it's going to be getting to the playoffs. Not saying that they won't have the ability, but you're going to be talking Sam Houston State. We've talked about it a little bit before. I think they're going to improve. Their defense has obviously been good. If their quarterback can stay healthy, they'll be a problem. Central Arkansas, they bring back another really good quarterback in Braylon Smith. I think that's kind of the top three. And I think they all have the ability to make the playoffs. But I think once you realize that they can make the playoffs, then you're talking about, all right, can one or two of them get a national seed? That means obviously if you get a top 8 seed, you might stand a chance to get a quote-unquote easier team in the second round compared to if you get a third. If you're one of those lower seeds, you're going to have to be kind of crawling from the very start. So I think that's the biggest thing, is how do you do against those teams in the Southland? And can you not fall prey to Southland shenanigans? You can't. You have to be very consistent, because if you're going to go out there and fall to
last year, last year's a perfect example, of Southland shenanigans. Nicholls rolls into Huntsville, number 9 team in the country, to play a Sam Houston State team that's going to roll out its backup quarterback and 2 receivers behind center. And all of a sudden a top 10 team in Nicholls is shut out by a team that got beat by Lamar the week before, or lost the week after.
Yeah, can't explain that. Yeah, so that's the biggest thing to me, is just kind of who can separate themselves.
And you talked about Sam Houston and Central Arkansas, but I'm really excited to see what a third year of Frank Selfo at Southeastern can really do, because, man, did they take some leaps in that second year. And I think I really like what he's doing over there and the direction he's taking it. And so, Southeastern, I think, is going to really kind of make some waves as he continues to really settle into his program. So yeah, I think the Southland does have potential to be a very, very deep team, deep league this year, and anything could happen. Would Nicholls be able to survive in a deeper league with all the injuries they had? Who knows, man? It's all going to come down.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, is because the Southland has grown, because you probably could have you could survive with injuries before 3 or 4 years ago. Sam Houston State head coach Casey Keeler told me a couple weeks ago. He was like, if the Southland was what it was, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever I first got here, we would have been able to make it through last season and been playing in the playoffs. But like now, there's no chance.
Yeah, there was always a big gap where you'd have 1 or 2 teams that were just way ahead of everyone. And then, everyone else would kind of fight for it. But now it does seem like a very, very deep league. And I think a lot of that has to, which I guess maybe we don't have time to get into today, but there was that transfer portal and a lot of these players kind of getting funneled in and making these teams stronger has completely changed this league. And I think you got to put the Southland up there as maybe not that top tier of SCS of conferences, but definitely a tier 2 and just a very, very competitive league.
Sorry, one last thing for me is, you're right. It's definitely in that next tier. It's not a Missouri Valley, but
is there a potential for us to get, or for the Southland to have 4 teams in the FCS playoffs next season?
That to me, that would require
big non-conference wins.
Big non-conference wins, undefeated non-conference slates. I mean, it's only 2 non-conference games, but you got to have big non-conference wins. Obviously, I'm not going to be a part of that at all with McNeese this season for APR reasons. But even that has to happen, and you have to have teams that are. I think in order for there to be 4 playoff teams, it's kind of going to have to be top heavy in the conference, where you have 4 really good teams, and then maybe the bottom 5 or 6 teams are not quite as good. Because if you have all these teams that are kind of beating up on each other, it's going to be tough. And I remember, I'm a little bit of a Southland vet. I remember covering Lamar in 2014 when Nicholls was a guaranteed win. Like, that was a guaranteed win going into that game. So what Rebo has done at Nicholls is nothing short of amazing, especially considering, they've been, the finances and everything. So what they've done is amazing. But in order for this conference to get 3 or 4, it's going to have to be 4 dominant programs, and then the other ones are, kind of iffy. So, but not impossible though.